What is going on, everybody? It is Mark Cargill, lead faculty and CEO here at Modern Pain Care, where we make you the complete clinician. Been on a major hiatus over the summer. Jared and I decided after our last podcast, I think, it's been a few months, but we decided we're going to take a little summer break, kind of recharge the batteries a little bit, get things kind of in order. Jared's got some things going on in his life. I've had some good things, some vacations and all that good stuff going on in my life. But been a good summer. Hopefully you guys have had a great summer yourselves. Hopefully you're buckling back in. I know kids are back in school. All sorts of good things happening. But before we get into more, let's hear how our co-host is doing. How you doing there, Jared Hall?
Man, I'm doing pretty well. Like we were talking about before we came on live. Dealing with a few things at work, but on the positive front of things, I am finally drawing near the completion of my first house. So we close on October 22nd. That's just right around the corner. Trying to lock in interest rates and all that sort of stuff right now has been a fun learning experience because never done that before. But I'm glad to be back on the horse and getting back on the podcast game. I've missed it. I've missed the regular chats with you and had a lot of people reaching out to us saying, "Man, where did that podcast go? Did you guys just decide to give it up?" I was like, "No, we're just taking a break. We're just letting the creative juices kind of bubble a little bit."
Yeah, with this break, our creative juices should be like at an all-time high. But yeah, I've also had some folks reaching out saying, "What are you guys doing? Like, you guys like you and Jared fighting or something? What's going on?" But yeah, no, we should be back at a regular clip now, going forward, and we'll hopefully have some good content ready for you guys. But as always, reach out to us. Let us know if there's anything else you want us to talk about. But today's episode, Jared, you've had some discussions with some of our coaching mentees and all these different things, and one of the common topics you mentioned was around stretching, which is definitely a conversation I've had with numerous students and mentees as well about, is stretching worthless? Because there's definite changes in stretching and how we're taught, what we're taught about it in school, and then what you hear on social media is like, man, it's not doing what we normally think it is. And so what's been your experience with stretching as far as using it as intervention, and then obviously what's been coming out on the research front?
Yeah, this is it's an interesting topic because it's come up two or three times lately in the mentorship program. And it's not in the way that I would have anticipated it coming up, because when I was in school, for instance, and I learned stretching, like I learned stretch what's tight, strengthen what's weak, right? Kind of a building off of the whole yonda upper and lower cross syndromes. You got to stretch out what's tight, you got to strengthen what's weak, you got to get everything back in balance, etc. But there's been a lot of talk over the last few years of social media about, well, stretching doesn't really necessarily stretch stuff out, right? It changes this concept of stretch tolerance. And Greg Lehman has been one of the guys that has really championed us learning a lot more about stretching. He's done some podcasts on it. He's written some articles on it and that sort of stuff. There's been a lot of Facebook posts. There's been a lot of, Twitters and all that sort of thing about what does stretching actually do. And with that, with the concept that it's much more of a neurologically mediated event when we increase flexibility, a lot of people have, it seems to me, a lot of younger clinicians especially have said, well, stretching doesn't do shit. So I'm just not going to do any stretching with people. I'm never going to use stretching as a form of intervention in clinic. And I think that's actually maybe turned out to be not necessarily a good thing, a little bit of a cliche baby with the bathwater type of concept, because at the end of the day, even if stretching doesn't change structural architecture of tissue, stretching is just a form of load. And that's what we're doing in clinic with people. We're just loading people. And there's some research that shows that undertrained or non-trained individuals can get muscle hypertrophy from stretching, because it's a tension load to the muscle. And what do muscles respond to? What do tendons respond to? They respond to tension type loading. So you can actually get some hypertrophy and some positive tissue changes from stretching if you're an untrained individual. But before we go on, I kind of want to get your thoughts on, what you've seen with that, the discussions you've heard, and what you've seen the evolution be.
Very similar responses from students is like, why even stretch? What's the point? And definitely there's been some discussions, especially in the athletic populations, where they found, static stretching can, inhibit athletic performance, some of the reactivity, muscle spindle unit type, function, that type of thing. There's that Conrad article, which I think, again, Greg, one of the big authority figures as far as in our profession and chiro professions talking about stretching, brought up the Conrad study from 2014 in clinical biomechanics, where I think they did like a 6-week static stretching program on the Achilles and calf, and found that none of the changes that were witnessed had anything to do with the muscle tendon unit being longer. It's more likely a stretch tolerance thing, kind of almost a neurologic, like your body's getting into, tolerating that tensile load better than it would elsewhere. But it kind of makes sense too, because there's always those like little party tricks you can do, like, you can get people doing like, squat down, touch your toes, and then do that kind of, stand up and try to extend through your knees, and you can get to where you're, touching your toes after doing like a minute of just kind of tensile loading of the hamstrings. And some of the things you can do where you're all of a sudden straight leg raise changes dramatically. We'll do this in courses where we'll teach. And Adrian, I think Lowe was the one in one of the courses too that showed us, like, if you can do a straight leg raise test and then have them look at, pre and post test, and you just do like some oscillating into end ranges versus that static holding and contract, relax, where you got the person's legs parked on your shoulder and you're having them push down and then pull back up. And then you and the patient are both grunting and struggling with it. And then, but you can do this one where you just do like a knee to chest, 30 seconds, a little piriformis, on and off 30 seconds, and a little, sciatic floss 30 seconds, and their straight leg raise, dramatically increases, probably more than what would be with this big long static stretch. And I'll do that in classes, and students are like scratching their head because it goes completely against, the narrative that they're kind of operating under, that, this static stretching is what's lengthening things. But yeah, I would agree with you also that I think it's not been also the best thing to just think that we need to throw any particular intervention. I mean, there's maybe some that have come along that we could probably bin a little bit, but stretching, people need to tolerate tensile load, to reach, to bend down, to do functional things in life. There's often times where you need to have the ability to elongate, and maybe it's not elongated as far as like lengthening, but to have your tissues tolerate the tensile loads that life brings on. So you should probably construct some movements and exercises that probably are some stretching type things. Now, personally, me in clinic, I don't do a ton of long static holding stretches, maybe more for that time under tension for some longer, held kind of where it is true, like, contractures and things like that. But not a ton on the, when we're thinking it's more, a lot of neurologically driven stretch tolerance type stuff. But what's been your experience as far as your evolution in your practice, Jarod, as far as where stretching has fit? Because I think, there might have been a period where I kind of took the, like, okay, man, why am I even wasting time doing any stretching, to probably come into more of a middle, instead of that false dichotomy that often gets formed here in social media. But what's been your experience clinically with it?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely, early on I stretched a lot, and then I went too far on the pendulum, and I went to not stretching at all, because I started to think at the same time that stretching was worthless, and now I'm much more in the middle of the road perspective, because I think there's a couple of points that you can really think about in which stretching might not be a bad idea, or might even be a good idea. Number one, a lot of patients like to stretch. In general, a lot of people enjoy stretching sometimes, and you can think about that for a couple of reasons. They might perceive that they're stretching out something that's tight, right? They're doing something beneficial. Secondarily, from an interoception standpoint, right? Just awareness of your body. When you stretch something, you get a sensation in that area that you don't typically get. So you're gaining awareness maybe of your body. You're feeling some things in your body maybe you don't normally feel. And I think there's a reasonable argument there that maybe your body likes that. Maybe your brain likes that a little bit sometimes. Next, if I want to meet a patient where they're at and they're already perceiving benefit from this, what is the harm in putting in a little bit of stretching? Stretching isn't completely passive. It is a form of loading just a little bit, even though maybe it's a low load. So maybe I do it at the end of a session, or maybe I do it as an accessory type of thing, or maybe I do it to keep them happy, but it's not the primary thing that we do. Or maybe I have them do it on their off days when I've loaded them really heavy the day before, and we want to introduce just a little bit of load on a quote unquote active recovery day, but I don't want it to inhibit their ability to come back the next session and load up. And then also, stretching, it probably stimulates the hell out of some nociceptors. When we think about we're increasing stretch tolerance, well, increasing stretch tolerance is either dampening down the peripheral ascension of that information through nociception, or at the spinal cord, or at the brainstem, right? We're doing things that limit the way that we respond to that. So a lot of people feel better after stretching for the same reason they feel better after foam rolling. It's kind of an intense sensation, and they probably get a little bit of that diffuse noxious inhibitory control, or what the conditioned pain modulation, whatever the hell we're calling it these days, right? They get this wide range dynamic inhibition of nociception due to this strong ascending, sensory information that they're getting, and then the subsequent gating or modulation of that information. So maybe it feels really, really good to them afterwards because they've got their system primed. And that might be a good way to, prove to them that they can feel better, right? Keep them bought into the program, modulate their nervous system, provide a low load in strategic times where maybe you want to provide that load. But then, I agree. I don't dose it so much like I used to with 1 minute and 2 minute holds. Most of the time I have people hold a position for 5 seconds, and I might do 15 or 20 reps. So we get that total time under tension. But I like the repeated exposure concept. Like, hey, I'm going to go into that, and then I'm going to come back out of that. And then I'm going to go into that, and I'm going to come back out of it. So I like more of an active engagement in stretching personally. And I don't have any valid evidence for that. But for the way that my mind works, a repeated exposure event seems like a cool way to go rather than just like, hey, hold this boring, terrible position forever.
Yeah, no, I would definitely echo too. Like that's been my mode of kind of going and stretching and thinking of it as like, almost like your habituation, getting into loading into sensitive ranges that the tissues haven't, comfortably been engaging in, and kind of engaging in nociception to see, can you tease at it to the point it starts, diffuse noxious inhibitory control, all those lovely things that we talk about. Can you start tapping into some of the neurologic events that can help make a movement that is once sensitive less sensitive to the movement? And again, if you can show patients that a movement that's valuable to them, that they reaching behind into the back seat, you do an open book or whatever you want to call it, and all of a sudden they start in, the first couple reps it's not fun, and the more they do it, they breathe, they nudge into it. I think it's an easier sell and something easier where they can kind of get into it versus like, here, I'm going to make it uncomfortable for you, and then just stay there for 30 seconds, and it's all right, just breathe, you're fine. Yeah, I definitely tend to do the on off more, higher rep, 20 30 reps, 3 second holds, kind of getting in and out, and letting people learn to kind of like Corey Blickenstaff stuff, the edge work where they're trying to get at the edge, breathe, trying to find that range, and instead of mounting defense, they can start making peace with that, sensitive range, and seeing if they can kind of get more comfortable in it. But yeah, no, it's definitely something that's evolved. I would agree with you too. It was a period where, stretching's awesome, stretching's terrible. And then, for the right patient, for what they need to do in life, it might be a great thing. For some people, not so much. Some of the people I think not so much, we probably should mention, some of our acute tendinopathies, especially our compressive tendinopathies, like an Achilles, distal Achilles at the insertional, your proximal hamstrings. You don't probably acutely want to be cranking a stretch on those, just because it tends to be the aggravating mechanism of a tendinopathy, is that tensile load where it's compressing the tendon against the bony structure, calcaneus, or the ischial tuberosity in the hamstring case. So there might be some times where, for particular conditions, that stretching may be, but eventually those two need to get back to it. It just might be acutely, you might want to hang away from it, especially if you see that in that patient's case, man, when they stretch, it doesn't really feel that good, and it kind of bothers, their condition, then probably want to hang away from it for a little bit. But again, of course, eventually people need to get back to where they're able to lengthen a dorsiflexion stretch through. That's a pretty functional movement in life. But that has been something that, as you read Jill Cook stuff and others, and I was not very good with tendinopathies coming out of school, but that really was helpful to understand compressive tendinopathies. Any other times where you think stretching may not be helpful that come to mind, Jared, or any other times where, because I think there are some people that might love stretching, too much, but have you seen anybody who were stretching, or in maybe that situation or other situations that come to mind where stretching may not be a good thing?
Yeah, I can think of a couple of scenarios. I'm glad you brought up the tendinopathy scenario because that was something I wanted to address, and I really appreciate the fact that you said acute right? Acute insertional tendinopathy, we probably don't ram into stretching. But like you said, I mean, you start getting to mid-stage rehab and especially late-stage rehab, that's exactly what we need to be doing. So you back off of it early, you calm shit down, you start loading it up, you get it feeling better, and then you expose it to the stuff that it needs to be built back up against. So, there's Greg Lehman in my head again. Um, other scenarios where I don't think it would be a great idea to do a ton of hamstring stretching, for instance, is there are some people that feel tight in their hamstring because they have more of a neurological issue going on. And then taking that hamstring up and holding it at 30 or 60 seconds of tension is essentially putting the sciatic nerve in a tensioned position, which it may not be super happy with. You might not get a great response. So I'm thinking early stage or more irritable neurological issues that present, patients say, man, I've just got this crazy tight hamstring. It's just so tight. I just need to stretch it out. A long duration load on that might not be an awesome idea, but I would even say that that's probably to some degree case dependent, and how irritable is that nerve. And then finally, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole with this because I think we can, but a lot of hypermobile or really, really, really flexible people feel like they need to stretch all the time. And I have a theory on that. I don't know that stretching is bad for them, but it's probably not the most effective thing for them either. And I have absolutely zero evidence for this theory, but my thought is when you are really mobile, your joints probably do move around a little bit more than the average person's, right? You don't have as much ligamentous stability and that sort of thing. And if we just think about mechanical load and movement, you're probably getting a little bit more nociception. You're probably getting a little bit more mechanical load and movement at the joints when you just live your life, when you just hang out in certain positions, when you just go through everyday life. So maybe your system is getting more nociception than the average person's, and there is a response to make that area feel tight, make that area feel gunked up, make that area feel like it needs some sort of load. And I would argue that working on proprioceptive exercises and working on strengthening are a better long-term solution, rather than the short-term solution or the short-term fix you get from just stretching more, stretching more, stretching more. But that is totally a hypothesis. And, I think that it has some merit, but I can't say that for sure.
Yeah, no, good points. I definitely agree with you. The acute sciatica that's coming from a herniated disc. When I had mine, you would not catch me dead stretching my hamstring. Well, if I did, it was not a friendly event for a good few weeks, but eventually needed to get back to where that sciatic nerve could take on tensile load. But acutely on neuropathic pain issues into extremities, not a friendly event for your patients. But that's, again, you fit your treatment to your patient and make sure you're not just doing things because we just do them habitually. You got to have that clinical process that we spoke about. As we've been speaking about today, a lot of these topics come out of our coaching program and mentorship program. If you're ever interested in chatting with Jarod or I on that program and want to see if it's a good fit for you, don't hesitate to reach out. We have a web address, modernpaincare.com/call. If you jump on there, you can book a call with us and we can see if it's a good fit for you. If it's not, no big deal. We can obviously have a chat, go over where you're at in your career and give you some good guidance and go from there. But Jarod, do you have anything else that you would like to discuss with the folks before we wrap up our inaugural episode after our hiatus?
No, I just really encourage everybody to reach out with us with questions or concerns. Give us feedback on these episodes. Let us know how you're feeling about them. Are you happy that they're back? Is there anything specific that you'd like to hear about? Mark and I, we have a list of about 15 topics that we could go through, but we prefer to talk about the things that people want to hear about rather than what we want to hear about. So definitely shoot us a message and let us know.
Yeah, these episodes are for you guys. We want to serve you guys with some content that's valuable to you in your practice. So hopefully these have been valuable. We've gotten some good feedback, but the content is driven by your guys' wants and needs. So don't hesitate to reach out to us. Email Jarod at modernpaincare.com, Mark at modernpaincare.com, or obviously on social media. And we're happy to take any suggestions. A lot of our topics come from you guys. So let's keep them coming in. But we'll wrap it up for today's episode. It was great getting back on the saddle of the podcast. We'll be coming back at you guys weekly here for the time being, unless some other hiatus, unless the Hall household studio build, it delays things a little bit, but that'll be a good reason for us to take a break. But yeah, we should be here on the weekly clip. And again, reach out if you have any questions. Until then, we'll talk to you next time.